the topics is going to be how to draw using framework method. So, okay, simplifying wide panoramic scenes onto paper. So, I've seen a lot of problems with this, and when I also struggled with this when I first started drawing on location. Especially, I remember back in 2006, and I started going about the city and started strangely walking and sketching alone. But let's find out why we have to be reminded of why we do sketch on location, because all of us could take pictures and just go about taking pictures and that's it, no. But the thing about sketching and is looking, and here it imprints. Okay, we remember places, what happened when you were sketching. So those are one of those experiences. I mean, I can remember things that happened while I was sketching a certain sketch when I was making it. And then, of course, the one of the benefits of sketching is really about also observing the places, observing details, slowing down time. And then the smell, the temperature, and the sound are triggered from looking back at your sketches at that time. So it's who has this experience?
Yes, I do.
yes. It triggers. It's the artifact, which is the sketch itself, triggers a memory. Okay, so an example of a sketch that I made and appropriate for this topic is the Metropolitan Theater. I mean, I've been sketching and 3D modeling this building for the longest time, and then it was my first time to sketch it back in 2014. When I was sketching this with the Urban Sketchers Singapore, in that afternoon, I was standing. I remember standing here. And we were like 2 streets. So I mean, like 10 meters away. 15 meters away. It was pretty close. So it's like a very wide angle. Well, what you're looking at here is actually 120 degrees field of view. Our eyes has only a vision of 60 degrees. Okay, so 60 degrees is really acute. 90 degrees is this angle. 120 degrees would be twice more. So I have to pan around my head, my eyes to look. I have to look around in order for me to be able to see the entirety of this building and observe and sketch it on a small piece of paper. So this is the actual line sketch. So I concentrated more on the line sketch. This took me about 30 to 45 minutes to do. So I sketched it on an 8 by 5 inch Moleskine sketchbook. So that's just 1 page measurement. So it's twice. So I found the middle one stretch of paper of two sheets is the actual picture. So when I took a camera shot with this of this building, thing about it is that even the camera has limitations of the angle, right? So this is like a very, you have to take multiple pictures in order for you to fully photograph the entire thing or stitch them together. So this is roughly about 60 degrees, I guess. So it's ever challenging and quite overwhelming for some with this. No, so you don't know how, where, and what to start. That's the biggest problem here. What to look for is another thing. No? So this is one of those struggles that I did. No, but before anything, let's look at the fundamentals of drawing. Based on Betty Edwards, the author of Drawing on the Right Side of the Brain. So her book has been around for decades, I think since the 1970s. She made 5 principles that you follow in order for you to draw properly. Okay, so she explained it. Okay, and then the first principle would be drawing lines of the edges that you see. So what are edges? Okay, so you represent these edges. When I say edges of things that you see, like, okay, let's take an example of my arm. Anyway, you see a certain shape, right? The lines, the edges of my arm when I'm looking at my arm, it's differently. I see it differently, whereas you see it differently in a particular way. Thing is, the edges of that what you perceive are actually tangents of my arm. And when you say tangents of my arm, what do you mean? If you remember in our geometry classes, what tangents are?
Where the lines meet?
No, tangents are like a curve. For example, the tangent of a circle.
Okay.
Like when you place theoretically in geometry.
Tangent would be where the lines meet. Could be.
Yeah, exactly. When you have a circle, that's usually the example. And then you have a line. And if you place it in one particular spot of the circle, that's where it's only one spot, right? And what particular, the theory is that it's the line would be touching it. The straight line would only touch into one point of that circle. So that's the tangent. So similarly, it's the same thing. You see, this is the surface of my skin. And then when I point it here, this is the tangent of my arm that you see. And then if I place my finger away from you, I mean to the other side, then you don't see my finger point. So the thing is, this is the edge that I'm talking about of any object that you see. So we draw the edges or the tangents that we see. All right, what you perceive. So it's very simple. I mean, like a very simple principle that, you can't see the lines behind the buildings, right? But what you can see is the outer edges of a building and the objects in front of the building or on the building that's facing you. So that's the number one principle. And then replicating shapes. Okay, those outer lines, the silhouette of a building, for example, is what I usually tackle first. So you draw the shapes, you replicate the shapes based on the silhouette or the edges or the tangent edges of an object. Edges of the objects can be transformed into replicated shapes on paper. So it's a silhouette or the shape. And then representation of what you see onto two-dimensional paper or canvases. So this, for example, my microphone has a certain shape. Now you can start out drawing this microphone by just looking at the edges and just following the shapes before the details. Okay, so replicating shapes. The third principle is angles and proportions. So we all know about this thing about perspective drawing, the mystery of perspective. Paano yun? There's a vanishing point somewhere, and then we have this scene that you usually see in streetscape that there's a foreshortening. Foreshortening means what's closer is usually drawn bigger, and what's farther away is drawn smaller on paper. So it gives the viewer the cue of distances and depth. So if you see here, I drew a tree at this size, and then if it's farther away, it's drawn smaller. And then if it's a third one would be smaller still on paper. That's an illusion. So that's the third basic principle of drawing. And then of course we have shades and shadows. The thing about it is that it gives cue of depth and form. In order for you to communicate form, you have to have shading on it, right? For example, the round thing, the circle thing, is interpreted as what? A sphere rather than a circle, because I gave cue here of a shading of it. There's the sun shining here, and then the shadow is a sort of shading is happening underneath on this side. And then depth is usually represented or a depth is associated with shadows. Okay, it just gives a sense of depth of something. If it's like a long covering or of a window, then there's a shadow that's casted on the wall. And then the fifth is gestalt, as she calls it, and it's just putting everything together. So if you put everything together, it's you combine those first four principles. You have your edges, you replicate the shapes, you do a perspective, and you add shades and shadows, and you form a picture, the sketch. Going on to our topic this afternoon, going back. So those are the five principles lang. And just a reminder for us. So any questions, by the way?
Just one quick one.
Yes,
Sometimes
okay.
when you start sketching, they always say you look for your lines, the straight line, left to right, up and down.
Oh,
I'm looking at
well,
it. Draw lines and edges. Do I care at this point where the verticals and the horizontals are?
yes. Later on, I'll show an example why this framework method is important for you to scale your drawing onto your paper properly, so that you don't have to the scene is cut by I didn't draw it smaller enough so that everything fits. It's too big for the paper, for example. How do you solve that? Yeah. Later on, I'll show you an example of this. Examples, plural. So how do we perceive when we try to sketch what we look and see? Okay, so it's when we sketch, we are combining. Looking means we're looking around, we're turning our heads, we're looking up, down, observing, looking. And then seeing is more of like a concentration of looking. You're seeing and noticing stuff in your view. So I borrowed this research from Mario Lynn Harris, who wrote the book of the urban sketching book handbook series, Panoramas and Vertical Vistas. When I read these lines, I mean, I never realized that I was actually looking and seeing. Okay, he explains that you only see a very small fraction of what you're observing at a time, at any given time, because you don't have this vision. Normally you have 60 degrees vision, that's a maximum, but normally it's even smaller than that. It's just this very small cone of focus, or seeing what you're looking, what you're observe. And then he states that we see less than we think. So it's that the explanation. We actually see less than what our vision is offering us. Yun nga, as I explained, it's just a small percentage of what we see, and then we see more than we realize. Okay, so what does he mean by that? We piece the fragmented elements, or what we see, parang one segment at a time, into a sketch. So when we sketch, we actually record everything that we see. When we look around, we don't normally notice every detail, but we only notice like certain fragments of what we're looking at. And then if we sketch, we put everything together. That's what he meant. We piece the fragmented elements into a sketch or drawing, and then we move our eyes to what we notice into one drawing. So therefore, his statement is, we see more than we realize. This is another illustration of this now. We have about, you see that what I'm showing here is that what we notice or what we see actually is in that cone. Because like a small object is very simple. You only notice everything if it's a small object. But if you go out and try to draw buildings, now that's another matter, because it's overwhelming. Like your vision is like so wide, you don't know where to start, right? You don't know what to do. Now, so this is an example of what I meant with back in 2006. How many years is it? Anyway, 2006. Back in 2006, this is what I drew of the post office building. I wasn't really planning on. We were going around with a bunch of architects, and we stopped at this for 15 minutes. And so this is what I did. I used watercolor on a small sketch pad that I was making, but it didn't fit my page. So it's the post office building was supposed to be up to here. So I didn't plan for this. I was just sketching, and then this is what happened. Very loosely, no? This is something that when I started really trying to master watercolor back then in 2006. So that's one example. So this is back in, I think, 2018. So this is an example of a building from far away, okay, which is the Natural History Museum. So this is from the Bayleaf Hotel. It's quite small because it's really only a very small angle of my view. So therefore, I was able to sketch it easy, because it's not a wide thing that you have to turn around your head like the Metropolitan Theater. Easily observed, because you don't have to. You can only you can concentrate your vision in just that view, that acute angle. But however, if you have something like you go to a church like this is the San Sebastian interior. This is back in 2011. It took me a while to do this, of course. This, I think, took me about 4 visits in order for me to finish this. But the thing is, the angle of this is pretty wide. So I had to start with framing first the middle of the altar area, the tabernacle, yes. And then the rest is this now. So you have the pulpit, and then you have the windows. It's a pretty wide angle. So if you take a look at the actual picture, okay, so this is the actual. It's actually a good idea to actually go there and sketch, because when you take a picture of the place, the camera cannot pick up the details. You can only see it when you're there and observing. So I had to go there 4 times. I mean, every Saturday, and for 4 weeks. So in order for me to actually get all this right, because I have only about a window of I think 2 hours for every session, because the church opened at 10 and it had to close at 12. So it's because of lunch break. So therefore, okay, I'll do it. I'll do it next week then. I'll continue next week. But this is something that of course, back then I was kind of slow, taking my time, doing all of this, drawing all the details. I love it. So you can see the amount of work here. All right. Anyway, in 2014, with Urban Sketchers Singapore, we went there. So this is another method. I mean, like, it's a massive thing because I wanted to capture the ceiling. So this time I made it into I drew vertical. So this is the actual sketch concentration when I was there. So this is like 30 minutes worth of this, and then as time goes by, you have to go faster. You have to sketch faster. You become actually good at it but through time. So another example is this. This is the interior of the atrium of the Natural History Museum. This one, I took a picture because this is a composite of picture. Now, if you take a look at a single picture, this is only what I can get with one picture of my camera. The widest angle I could take is one here. And then if I take another one, this is all I see I can take with the camera. So by taking a lot of pictures, I composited this. I mean, I only had to I was able to composite this picture after. I mean, I had to go and use my computer and Photoshop and photo merge everything, and it calculated for me. But the thing is, with the very wide angle like this, it's very overwhelming for those who wouldn't know how to start this, don't know how to do it. The trick here is this. This is how I started. Okay, so this is the very initial lines, because this is what I saw. I had to really first identify the shapes. The very first, the vertical, which is this. The ano yung what's the ground line for that arc? Okay, if we go back and take a look at the composite, this is what I mean. So from the ground line up to here, I have to I have to determine that on paper so that I won't overshoot anything. I mean, if it's meaning it has to be small enough, or not too big, not too small, so that it will fit my paper. And then the shape, relating it to this. So this is what I mean by framework. The very initial things, the tentative sketch. So this is the arc of that arcing column, and then the shape of the opening of the skylight. First is you draw the edges that you see. Draw principle number 2, the principle of replicating the shapes, which is this. So I even had the initial shape of, or the gesture of, that walk. Take a look at that walkway here on the upper part. And then eventually, this is what I had the that column first, and then the second curve, third curve, and then that, and then everything else. And from there, I get the initial shape. But although I have honestly, can you see my mistakes?
Why would that?
You wouldn't know. But the thing is, the most important thing here is, actually all the details, it's all, I can't do all the details because this is like a 30-minute sketch. I didn't have time to color it. Actually, we were not allowed to color it, by the way, inside.
Yung pencil.
So therefore, I was doing everything in pencil. I had to follow the rules, right? There are details of skulls, replicated skulls of dinosaurs. One of the most interesting is the T-Rex here, and then that's nice over there, sitting on the bench, but as a scale. And that's it. This is the final drawing, but which I did not finish. I'm meaning to paint this over another topic, which is how do you watercolor, as an example. Probably is to assess and create the framework first of the scene on paper, okay, which is what I did. Simplify it, scale the shapes that you see and relate them to one another, and then detail only after creating the drawing framework. So don't worry about making mistakes. No one will know. No one will know. Questions so far?
Sir, I have a question.
Go ahead, Aldrin. Oh, yeah.
Sir, the question is, sometimes I draw also yung kumbaga panoramic or very wide angled na areas. What do you think is better? Or I don't know kasi. I'm trying to explore on the two sides of it, which is one, creating yung, should we say, ano ba to? An area or an output which is distorted at some point. That has
Don't worry about distortion. I mean, like for me, for example, if you take a look at the picture, actually the composite, the picture composite, it's not very to scale. The picture composite, the one I photo merge everything, all the pictures.
Yes.
It's up to you. It's up to you. I mean, no, you can't go wrong. If you feel that it's wrong, then that's you. That's your judgment call. Okay. And if you want to make it a bit more distorted, because what I did was a bit distorted. You could see the edges. Did you notice?
Yes, I have noticed, pero not to the extent that, for example, the output that I'm doing
Mm-mm.
on most of occasions are looking it in kumaga analogous to perspectives. Some of the drawings have been made in a two-point perspective. Then other drawings are lumalabas siya na 3-point perspectives. So
Okay.
ganun kalala yung distortion.
No, I experiment. I don't really it's just a representation of what you're seeing, you're perceiving. Every remember that we have only a very small area of what we see, right? And then we composite everything. I mean, it's like okay, draw this part, draw that part, draw this part. Ganun tayo. Pero the structure can be wrong also at the same time. But when you sketch, when you experiment these things, it's actually much more exciting. It doesn't matter. I mean, like, if you cannot make it picture perfect, okay, the main goal here is to actually just capture the essence of what you're experiencing. Okay, that's the number one thing about sketching. You never, I mean, if it's picture perfect, take a picture and then go home and trace it over into the paper. That's it. Diba? Done. But the experience of observing it on site, on location, and creating that memory, it won't happen if you do it at home, right? That's the difference between a studio work and something on location. On location, you have to do it faster. You don't want to stay there for long hours, or especially when you're standing.
Yes.
I learned the longest time I stood was 3 hours when I was trying to sketch the USD Arc of the Centuries. It was that small of a drawing, but every detail kasi I wanted to see. I mean, it has to be perfect. It has to be. But then once you realize that you have to draw faster, that within an hour, you actually up your skill to that. You have to attain it, and you can. It is attainable actually. In the end, what else? So I'm going to be creating an example here. Probably, if you have any questions, examples of a panoramic sketch. This is actually observing one part, the middle part, and then the end to my right. So this is how many degrees is this? Almost 180 degrees. So from my left to right, okay, observing this. And then if you take a look at the video time-lapse replay. So this is how I started. A framework. Okay, so this is a more complicated. So this is supposed to be like a 5-point perspective. Why 5-point? Why 5-point? There's a point in the middle. There's another two of the points which is on the horizon line is on the left and the right. And then the fourth and the fifth are the one below me, outside this paper, of course, from the bottom of the paper, outward of the bottom of the paper, and outward on the top of the paper. So 5-point. But I learned this through some techniques by. I was so impressed with urban sketchers, urban sketchers, Richard Michel. Is that the first thing that I did was the framework, okay, which is this, and then you go on to the details later on, okay. So it's like first you pencil the outline or the bones, and then you do all the details. You see the proportions here. Okay, so I'm just gonna point it out. The proportion of these two walls are too different. I mean, they're supposed to be the same, but I ended up not matching them. So I said, "Oh well, next time." So that's what what my mental trigger saying to myself now. If I make a mistake, I learn through mistakes. I don't usually erase. I don't carry around an eraser. I draw directly by pen at most times. And if you create a mistake, okay, I made a mistake, and that's it. You live with it. I actually learned a lot from doing all those mistakes, actually. And then the next time that you want to do a sketch is that you're reminded of that mistake. You don't want to do it again. Erasing, which is something that I teach my students not to do. I mean, don't do it. I mean, or another example here is this not. So again, even though I'm using digital, okay, with an iPad, I still hardly erase. Okay, hardly erase because of the habit that I picked up from traditional. So if we take a look at here. So here, I don't have a framework. So the first thing that I did was just really was the people, and then I started around it, relating it to each other. And the objective here was really to sketch the people, not the place, and the rest. Okay. Any questions so far? I mean, there's no rule in anything. You can approach this, but I'm teaching. What I'm teaching here is going to be with the framework. No? Let's take a building. Siguro. Let's take a. So the next planned location for sketching is going to be the post office building. Okay, let's take a look at the some angled ones. Like for example, this one. Okay, this is from far away, from the Jones Bridge, I guess. But you know, it's really so. But what if it's closer? So let's take a look at the closer ones. And if you have this sort of paper, how do you place your building onto here? First, determine the very first thing that's prominent here is really the length, right? The width of the building that you see here. If this is an angle. Here, we have to analyze our building. The very first thing that you have to determine is what you're going to draw. Do you want to draw this entire thing? Okay, even the silhouette. Okay, so you could decipher. But when you're looking at this actual, if it's like closer to you, it's overwhelming. Okay, this length is the key. First, you have to framework this. You have to determine this. But then, what about the height? You have to proportion it. Okay, so if we try to subdivide this into 4 equal spaces, I'm seeing that this is 1:2. Okay, so one part is this, and then the other part is this. Relative, the height of this, is it? No, it's actually 1.5 times. Okay, so that's the ratio of how you determine in drawing buildings. Okay, how do I translate that? I'm going to determine that this is going to be my 1.5, or first, better if you go for 4. 1, 2, 3, 4 parts. Then 1.5. You determine this as the height of the building, which is relatively about 45 degrees, and that's it. Yeah, this is how you do it. And if we take a look at our reference again and squish that out, you can see now you can actually draw the silhouette. The very first few things that you could do is the framework of this. Anyway, thing is, once you mapped out what your width is, this is important, and determine the height of this. These are the most 2 important key points. And then the shape, the silhouette, the edge, outer edges of your whatever, the shape that you see. This determines your structure, your first initial sketches. And then only then you start drawing the details inside. What really determines the success of their drawing is the framework. If how big. Okay, let's take another example here of the same building. Much more closer. Then you have your angle. How do you determine the angle? You take your pencil you take your pencil, right? You take your pencil and take a look at the angle of something on site. You look it through your eye and then replicate that angle onto your paper. Exactly. So the angle can be replicated, the angles here and then like this. This is one shape itself. If you determine that, you draw that shape, you can relate it to the next shape because it's like, how many widths of that? 4 and 3.5 of widths of this thing. And there's a small space here, so they could determine it in that. If you can determine this entire thing, which is something like this, and then the heights, and then you can have the framework for what size is it on paper. If you wanted to draw bigger or smaller, it's up to you. And then you draw in the details later on.
No, we just have to do it, Janelle.
Ano po?
We just
Come
have
again?
to practice it. We just have to practice it ourselves.
Yes.
Try to do it.
Ano kasi, all of these things that this method of me teaching, I can understand it. I mean, without me explaining to anyone, for the longest time, these are things that I realize and I draw them because I want to draw big stuff. I mean, the books I've read are examples lang, most of the time, and there's no explanation on how it was done. And then you realize these certain things like the cues, replicate the angles, replicate first the proportions, and then in order for me to get it on paper exactly, nicely, and technically okay. But what was in my mind was I have to draw it the way it looks and how I see it. That was the only thing that I was like thinking. It has to be right. It has to be correct. But now not so much. I mean, like, I can make it look like what it should look like, but not necessarily entirely correct. So I'm more loose now than before.
I have a question.
All right, Malu.
About the angle. You measure the angle, you put your pen out like this, and you try to replicate that, in paper. My problem is sometimes, you're looking at it like that, but when you get to the paper, kunyari nag-move your one hand, or you try not to move it, but if it did, it's like, okay, it's off again. Is there a way, or like a way to check? But
you hold your pad right beside what you're trying to replicate. You take the pencil very closely instead of you having to look down and looking up and then going like that. Would that help?
I guess it does.
Ayan. So one of those things that you have your hand, your sketchbook, and then you try to replicate the angle. Now another way of doing it is if you're in the correct distance, meaning if your subject matter or the building is within the height is like less than a pencil height that you're using. You can measure that by stretching out your arm extended, and then you can measure from the bottom of your pencil, for example, to that. Then you can trace the height. You replicate this view of the height of the building onto the paper. But this does not work if you are too close. Because you end up, you don't know how many pencils are there. You start counting how many pencils height of this by just measuring this now. And then you have to hold your arm straight very consistently to do that. In order for you to do that, you start counting. But then over the years, I made a sort of a skill set for me to determine the proportions. Okay, so if the height is 1, if and the width is this, how many height is to the width of the building ratio? So I usually count that. I use my 2 arms actually. I just measure ends of my arms, okay, to this length, okay, so that, and then I orient my arms horizontally, and then I start counting. Okay, so it's like this. Another way of doing it, like that. Parang scale is key. One of those most difficult is if you're familiar with the CCP building, this one.
Yeah.
See, the thing is, you don't see most of my students get this very very wrong. Either it's most of the time it's too short. So I determine this. I can determine this as 1, and I start counting 1 squares of this. If you can see, if you can draw a square out from that, you start imagining squares onto this. So that part is, and how many squares is that? That's about 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 and a half squares. And then you can use that as a measurement of the height of this entire thing. This 1 square. Ayan. And then it becomes proportion. How many squares is this? This is about 3/4 square of this. Mama Eileen, yes po.
Janelle, okay.
Opo.
So I was wondering what you meant by the title of the
Framework.
Drawing with the framework, no? Okay.
Mm-mm.
I didn't understand, of course. So now I understand. You draw the frame. So I think it's more of the process, no? You draw the
Yes.
framework, as you said, and then draw the inside.
Yes
Okay.
po.
I do it differently.
Okay.
I do it differently. Some people will say, I start from the center of
Oh, okay.
and then move away from the subject. Okay. So if I were to start with that rectangle, no, I'd look for the middle point first.
Mm-hmm. That
Okay?
can work.
Yeah. No, I'm just saying how different I see things.
No, it's fine. This is what I'm saying.
That there are different ways of doing things. Okay.
Yes.
Like what you said, you need a unit of measurement. I was about to mention that later. That there always needs to be a unit of measurement. So your unit of measurement with the CCP building was the distance from the edge, the left edge, to the flagpole.
No, at end to end, 7.5.
No. But your unit of measurement, your squares.
Oh, yeah.
Square, the measurement of your square was from the edge to the line. So I was wondering, so that because I don't want yung mga, as much as possible, I don't want a partial. You know, like you have that 1/2 at the right end. Okay. So I would start, what if we started from the middle equally? The left and the right. So you have an even number of, let's say, squares or rectangles, no? So that would be my unit of measurement. So walang fraction. That fractions muddle my head.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Yeah, diba? They're just estimates.
Tama. Yeah, estimates, yes. No, there's
so that's why
what
that what differs. Now I see the difference between how I do things and how you do things. Because I was really curious about the framework. I work from the inside to the outside.
the
horizontal line. I get the eye level line. Okay. So that is non-debatable, ma'am. Diba?
Oo,
You have your
the eye level.
your horizon line. Okay. And then you
Horizon line.
horizon line. Diba? Okay.
In order to determine that, it's much more
And
technical.
then I determine, I can choose the vertical.
And then the vertical.
And the vertical. And then I have an intersection.
Mm-mm.
And then I start drawing from there.
Because the vanishing, you're creating a vanishing point. Is that the case?
No, it's not that. It's like when I have an intersection, I have a vertical line, and then I have a horizontal line, and if I can divide also that building, what was the post office building? Okay, if you remember, it is a 2-point perspective, right? There's that circular line there, and then it goes outside. Okay, I will just choose one vertical line on that.
Yes.
It's
Tama.
The corner is
yes, tama.
vertical line. And everything else on the right is on the right. Everything else on the left, I draw on the left. Finish.
So let me translate that into to a sketch demonstration. Let's go to another page. This is what Ma'am Eileen says now. First, the horizon line determine. Horizon line can be much more, if you want to be much better, is usually 1/3 from this line. But if you're building, and then you have your determine where the corner is. From here, usually it's that kasi that's the eye level of a person. And then the height of a building, you determine first the 2 spots where it starts from the ground and where it ends. And based on this could be your 1 unit. Sorry, my Mylene. This is how I do the Tapos, if the building is like, for example, the facade of the and then you first determine from the end point the angle of the building.
Yeah.
Now you can't determine anyway, just replicate the angle of the top, and then based on this one, how many times or what fraction? I'm sorry, fraction of this height is the width based on your observation. But based on if you determine it's like the line is somewhere there, and then this becomes your facade of the building.
Yes.
And then it goes in a bit.
I find it easier to work from the center, and then that's why, well, if you run out of paper, then you just redo everything. and finally, that round thing is somewhere here, which is how many times? Something like this on the building. And then on top, there are elements of some of the elements here. Oops, like that. And then may mga columns, and then you have all these things that that goes on to this, and then you have the columns. Yeah, from the middle.
I'm trying to avoid explaining perspective drawings.
No, you cannot. Just put it in.
I know, because this is and then you have their steps. Okay, you have your steps.
Yeah.
And then this is how you do it. So this entire thing, see again, you determine the height. I ran out of paper because I did not determine the height. So if you did it wrong, you can always do it again.
Yes.
But the thing is, again, you can go the other way naman. First determine this, and then the corner ratio of the building, for example, and so that this fits the narrative. Yeah, tama yung Ma'am Eileen. I like the approach of, usually this is the horizon and a vertical edge of the. Normally this is like 1/3, and then 1/3 of the frame of the paper, and then everything else follows. If it's like you have a big element here, make it smaller here on the corner, so that you can fit
also
this.
Measure the sides.
Yeah.
The sides from the
This makes a smaller building. But
Yes.
then if that's too small for anyone, you shift the corner of the building, because if the element is too big here,
Yes.
then you have your horizon.
There's a larger
Yes.
large
Tama.
portion on the left side than on the right side. So you move your vertical. So the vertical can be movable.
Yes.
Uh,
The building is tama. Tama naman. And then you have this. And then you have your elements here. If you want to show more of this area, for example, this gives an opportunity of the plaza. You have trees, you have people, you have the benches here, the opening, and some elements of the foreground. And even, I think if you're lucky, you have the columns of the newly reinstalled columns of the Jones Bridge right here.
okay.
Yes, it's wonderful. It
I
looks
like that. So that's usually what I do first before I would make your framework. No?
Yeah.
Before what you said your framework is. I think we do that naman eh. Except that instead of lines, which is a stronger commitment, usually we make like dots lang just to
okay. Dots.
dots.
All right.
Parang yung ano lang, yung sinasabi mong edges. Yeah, the edges. Yeah.
The edges, the tangents, edges.
Yeah.
The tangents the tangents of anything.
Okay, thank you.
All right, good. No, it's great. No, Ma'am Eileen has her view, and she shared it, and it reminded me. Oh nga, tama.
Yes. Units
But
of
the
measurement.
the most you have to determine is really the stop sharing. The thing about it is that to keep in mind, okay, in conclusion, everyone, is that you don't overshoot your what you're trying to draw out of the paper that you have. Is making it small enough, but not too big, but small enough, just small enough, so it fits everything what you want. It's the way to it's proportioning it. And somehow, if you can determine the height is to the width ratio. Sorry, I like fractions sometimes.
That's why I hate fractions. I always run out of paper.
And then, just so that's why if you start drawing, kasi the something to avoid is you don't determine everything. That's okay too, but you end up sometimes just concentrating all the details, and you end up with a very big drawing on your small paper. You don't catch what you intended to catch in the first place. See, that's okay too. That's okay too, because I've done it in the past.
It's very artistic, Jenny.
Yes, okay lang. No, anything goes naman eh. Walang there's no rule eh. There's no but if you're my student, there's a set of rules that you have to follow.
Yes.
but in sketching kasi, there's no, in fine arts, there's no determining rule to exactly say that you have to follow this. It's up to
Now,
you.
we have to know the rules, Janil. We have to know the
Yes.
rules
You have to know the rules.
so that we can break them.
Yes, exactly. It's 5:30, and I think it's time for other people to ask questions also. If there's like a burning question, you can always also chat if you're too shy to ask that question, because I'm reading your comments also. Shoot. Aldrin, what profession are you? Architect. Yes. Kasi we were trained in a certain manner of drawing and a certain way of painting.
Yeah.
And then,
Actually, and that's why I'm practicing din every now and then in terms of sketching, drawing, etc. Because it's something that I think I need by this point in time. I need to, to venture out eventually dun sa traditional setup of sketching and drawing.
Yes.
So I'm trying out different points, following other artists in terms of drawing yung environment itself. Just now, I'm still looking outward on what type or what techniques that actually fits me and what I really enjoy. So testing everything out. in
Yeah,
terms of
testing
that.
it. Try it out. I mean, like,
Actually, the 2-page spread, you have sketched horizontal and vertical layouts of that. The thing about yung the vertical 2-page spread of drawing itself, it comes at some point it becomes problematic, especially when you are exceeding the point of view, the standard point of view of
yeah,
35 to 60 mils of point of view. Once you've extended that, doon na nag-uumpisa yung And sometimes
distortions.
it's tricky, but I
Yeah.
think it's enjoyable then on the process. So
Yeah. It's no, there's no problem in that. I mean, like, I still have my sketch actually. It's like this
yes,
one.
that's really good and I'm in awe, especially when looking on those types of drawings, because how the hell did they do that in the first place?
Oh yeah.
No, again, as I said, no, kanina si Hinares has said that we see only a fraction of what we look at a time, and then we piece these things together until you create the entire thing. So I'm noticing, these things, and then relating it, the elements to each other, the shapes, and then until I go, do I see on the ceiling?
Yes, and
Okay.
when we saw that output, the distortion clearly dissipates eventually.
Yeah.
And that's what I'm trying to learn from looking
No
at
one will
others.
know.
Yes,
No
no one will know,
know.
but that was those things are really good, and I'm trying to every now and then emulate and fail miserably on that, but it's okay.
No,
I
it's
guess.
it's fine. And it's a lesson itself, no? But just continue sketching. Every sketch is a lesson, so to
Yes.
improve.
Precisely.
And then when you make the mistakes, and you have to be honest with yourself that you made that mistake, and so the next time you try to avoid it, you want to be better in avoiding that mistake. Yes, exactly, right. Okay, I guess I know this is it for this talk na. Let's probably we could continue this in future talks, even if you want to discuss this further. Other topics. Siguro I'll start with Mama Eileen, watercolor. Next, basic stuff.
Anytime, basta
Baka marami kang comment dyan if I'm going to start lecturing about watercolor. Biglang lang,
white.
I'll make it into the afternoon. Comment comment on my mistakes, whatever wrong things I say, so that yes, tama.
So rather than Sir Janel, I'm going to ask, how about color theory rather than going into the precise
Color theory is something I teach also. But yes, I have a lot of books about color theory and watercolor itself. No, I could say, what exactly do you want to know about color theory?
Well, the process itself, because when on the last time that I joined USk, I've noticed that some of the members actually start from coloring rather than sketching.
Yeah.
And that was a very interesting technique to
That's not Aldrin. That's not color theory.
Oh, technique.
That's not color theory. So this is
Practical coloring.
Yes, practical coloring. Color first, ink later. Yes.
Yeah,
It's another book.
Aldrin, your maybe what you really are thinking. What you're thinking about is how to get started with color.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Aha.
That's not color theory.
Especially for me, I'm actually slightly a bit afraid of coloring. So
I
I
see.
practice more on line works kasi.
I see. So everything I learned, the first things I learned from is through Thomas Scaler.
Thomas Scaler?
Yes, he's
check
a
on that.
watercolorist architect.
Thomas Schaller.
Scaler. Yes,
Scaler.
Scaler.
Schaller.
Scaler ba?
Oh yeah, I think I
Scaler.
saw it. Yeah, Thomas W.
But actually I read from, this is his latest book. This is more of the most latest, his third book ever. But I had his first book, which is Architecture in Watercolor. That's how I started watercoloring. Where he published it in 1990. I got a copy in 1996. So when I started out, if you say color theory and how to apply, are you talking about application of which color to put in to your paper?
Yes. More on there. I think that I've encountered different approaches to that. Like
Yes,
start
different.
with a darker color, then move your way to a lighter one, or choosing proper
There
colors.
are other
etc.
ways to do it, Aldrin.
There are other ways. You can see my videos on. First is actually consistencies. The mixture of, no, you go monochromatic in if you're trying to master watercolor, is consistencies first. That's my opinion, huh?
No, I'm still going to look it up.
The consistency is the formulation of watercolor pigments in ratio. Okay, the ratio of watercolor pigment and water. How much water do you put into a part of a watercolor pigment? If you have to master that first. That's the most fundamental. It's like there are different types. There's tea consistency, milk, cream, and then you go into honey consistencies. If you master those consistencies, or when to use cream, for example, when to use tea consistency. Now, very, parang drink. Just imagine coffee. So, and then there's the pinaka more pigment than less water is would be honey, for example. So when do you use all of these consistencies? When you and then after which, iba pa yung drawing, ha? That's monochromatic. Yun, master first, and then when you can master these consistencies, they call it sometimes consistencies. Well, that's the term that I'm used to. Then you move on to yung mga wet on wet techniques, or mga different variations of techniques, dry on wet, wet on dry, dry on dry. Mama Eileen, sorry.
Yes.
And then after which and then there's yun din about if I'm going to talk about watercolor, I have to talk about also brushes. I have to talk about the water. I have to talk about the pigments, what sort of things, and then the paper is also important. How much are you willing to spend? You don't have to spend so much. This is something that I developed as for my students, kasi they don't want to spend thousands of pesos. Oh, you can only spend like 500 pesos on an entire pigment set of 6. How do we do that? Oh, we have to
mix.
No, we have to buy in bundles and then we squeeze out each when we create sets of watercolor. Ooh. Anyway, thing is, yun, the economics of watercolor and how to go cheap but not quality, don't forgo quality, parang ganun. What's the best paper, but something affordable. But that's a future topic, okay? So
yes.
I'm just teasing because
looking
it's a
forward to it.
long talk. It's a long talk, and all these questions, kasi I had so much questions. It was only clarified with one book. Which is Thomas Shaler's watercolor architecture in watercolor. Shaler. Okay,
Shaler. No, you will see him. He'll be giving demos later. In May.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Here?
No, Italy. You will have access to it.
Shaler.
Yes, Thomas Shaler.
I have all these 3 books actually. The second book is all about, which I bought in year 2000, which is like 22 years ago. The Art of Architectural Drawing. And then suddenly, when he quit the architectural scene of illustrating for professional architecture firms, I mean, he was gone like 10 years. And then later on, he popped up and I saw his what happened to him? And then when I saw his works, it's different now.
Very loose.
Yeah, very loose. If you're interested in watercolor, even now I'm still learning. I'm trying to learn how to make it better. But that's another topic. Okay, it's nearing 6 o'clock. Okay. I have a comment here. Not a question, but I would like to be very interested how to learn the 5-point perspective.
Yeah, that's very fascinating.
Really?
Yeah. That's very complicated.
Yeah, sure. I thought my students how to do it, but and then nagigets naman nila. Pero yeah, it's okay, it's a long story. Probably yes. Okay, siguro, yeah. Siguro let's make that a future topic.
Yep.
Where I can tackle these things, and I have to make more examples. Alrighty. So yeah, yes, Grace. Let's make that as a new topic for future. But next one is let's go basic watercolor next time. For the next month, most likely. Yan Aldrin
Going
and
with
then for
that.
anyone.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you.
With that,
Thank you so
thank
much.
you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Interesting as always.
Yeah, thank you, everybody.
Thank you, everybody.
Okay. Bye bye.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye. Cheers. Bye.